Welcome to Mind Vault podcast, where we unlock minds one story at a time. In today's fast-paced and ever-evolving work environment, understanding the importance of mental well-being is crucial for both the employees and the employer. Whether you are a leader looking to implement changes or an employee seeking balance, this is the space for you. So let's dive in and discover how we can transform our workplaces into thriving environments for mental health. Boniwe Dunster is a human resource executive with a master's degree from University of Cape Town. She has 18 years experience from various industries. She is a strong advocate for fair workplace practices and anti-bullying, and advances her work through her membership with the International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment and various media platforms, both locally and globally. So Boniwe, welcome to Mind Vault podcast. Thank you so much for gracing us. Can you please tell us more about yourself and what inspired you to do human resource?
Thank you so much for having me. It's great. It's really a great pleasure and honor. What inspired me to be in human resources?
Yeah.
It was never part of the plan.
Okay.
I never intended on studying human resources. It's found me somewhere else.
Right.
I was an intern for public relations, and one of the HR managers said, "I'd like to interview you for a position." I went for an interview, and then the rest is history. But what also kept me within that space, I saw that there was an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
Within the workspace. And because I was coming from a unionized, environment, blue collar, you realize the need, for that connection between HR and people, educating, translating complex, processes into layman terms and all of that. And every time seeing somebody being happy or being able to engage with somebody or be part of their success really kept me within HR, and it made me to continue, in the field. So yeah, I think that has been it in a nutshell.
So thank you. That was so beautiful. So the thing for me as a psychiatrist, I mean, I have been employed. Now I'm self-employed, and
Sure.
it's still a very small company. So we don't use human resources much. So I don't interact so much with human resource. And so I believe that my knowledge of what human resource really is, or the people in human resource really do, is very limited. So I'm asking you to please elaborate more on what is human resource and what do they do in a corporate or even the state facility?
Sure. So human resources is really a people's profession, all right? And also a profession that really bridges, the gap between organizations or corporate and the people itself. So we find ourselves being on a more operational side of things in terms of day-to-day implementation of policies, disciplinary hearings, recruitment, paying people on time, learning and development, but also having to support the strategic, side of the business, whereby the business has, a strategic plan to achieve certain results. How do we take that strategy and translate it into practical day-to-day human resources, practice? Because we need to understand that for an organization to achieve its results, they need to do that through people. And who has a better understanding of people? It's us as HR professionals, as behavioral scientists as well, right?
Yeah.
So you take the business strategy, translate it into an HR strategy, translate it, into your processes, into your policies and day-to-day activities. So you actually bridge the gap and bring the two parties, together.
Okay.
And as such, we are a profession that really needs to be more, objective in terms of having to support the organization holistically. And I say that because we need to be the advocates for fair and best people practices, looking after the interest of the people. But in the same breath, we need to also be, a guide and a true star, for the organization itself, in terms of doing the right things, making the right recommendations, because we are the custodian of the processes. We understand the legislation better. They don't. And our responsibility is to make them understand and take them on the journey with us so that they can find each other, in the employment relationship between the two parties, which is the employer and the employee.
All right. So it is also a misconception that some people might perceive HR as someone who represents the employer.
Yeah.
And so the employees might not necessarily feel comfortable coming to HR to complain or to raise a concern that is coming from above or from management.
Yeah.
So can you clarify that misconception and maybe inform us about what informs that kind of an attitude sometimes? Yeah.
I think that attitude or misconception, if I may call it that, it's not also far-fetched because people say that based on their experience. So we cannot invalidate people that have not experienced better HR professionals. Where that comes from, I just have to say that the HR profession has evolved over time. You know, personnel management, we were known for just payroll, you know, paying wages. They didn't even call them salaries, paying wages, right? Recruiting, and they would say we hire and fire, which we also don't. But we are the custodians of those processes. Like I said, we need to play a fair and an objective role because we understand people, and we also need to help, you know, the organization to understand people better on how to get the best out of them.
Yeah.
In doing that, there's a relationship between two parties, and sometimes, like in any other relationship, some things they just don't go right at a point in time.
Yeah.
And in that, you bring us in as experts of the processes or custodians of the processes. However, you would find that there are instances whereby there are organizations that do not hold HR in high regard, therefore disregarding their role and seeing it as a more administrative role and seeing it as an executor of management instructions, right? So if from a cultural perspective, it's not held in high regard, employees will also not perceive it in high regard.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. And then secondly, on the employee side as well, we have a workforce whereby employees are not interested in really, you know, keeping abreast in terms of the changes within the legislation, having to read policies, having to read their employment contracts, having to understand their performance contracts or KPIs.
Yeah.
In that, they come to work for the sake of coming to work and getting a salary, but they don't also understand their responsibilities towards that employment relationship because we both actually have, you know, a responsibility to each other as an employer and an employee. When something goes wrong, and I'll just start on an employee side. When something goes wrong, probably there is a case of misconduct, maybe misrepresentation or theft, you know. An employee would automatically believe that whatever happens, HR needs to protect them, even if they themselves have done wrong, right? But when you start saying you were in the wrong, you have broken a rule, and the rule that you have broken, you know about it because you have been socialized on onboarding. It's contained within your employment contract and the policies, you know, and, you know, the way that we do things.
Yeah.
And the employee will not be receptive of that message, and therefore would assume that HR is siding with management. Though they were not, you know, they were not in the right side of things, right? And therefore, you having to be objective and say, but these are the facts of the matter. They can make you look like a bad, you know, HR person, but the person has actually, you know, done wrong. Sometimes employees go AWOL. They vanish for a week or two. You can't find them.
Yeah.
It's wrong. You've got a responsibility towards your employer. You have to come and do your job, keep your end of the bargain so that the employer can do the same.
Yeah.
And then when the employer starts instituting a disciplinary hearing, it's like, but HR didn't protect me. So who is wrong? So there's that one part.
I get you.
The second part is that then you have the business or managers, right? Who they themselves sometimes don't even understand these processes.
Yes.
And they would assume that they understand because everybody thinks they can do HR because HR is simple. And then they get it wrong at times, you know, fire people without processes, you know. Sometimes they would demand that people's salaries be stopped, which is wrong. You can't do that, right? And when you can't do that and you say to the person, you know, you can't stop the salary without following a process, without having to understand where the person is, without having to go through, you know, a process of natural justice in terms of disciplinaries. You can't.
Yeah.
Then the business gets angry at you as HR and say, you don't really understand, you know, business and profits, and therefore we can't continue paying money. But I'm saying there are processes. That's why we have labor legislations. That's why we have the Labor Relations Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment, the Employment Equity Act. There are so many that help us. But we are in the middle of these two parties who believe that they understand them better than us. But the last part, when people don't also have confidence in HR, it's when you also find businesses getting HR to do their jobs for them.
Yeah.
And why do I say that? Because you find that when bad news are supposed to be delivered to an employee, whether it's a dismissal or whether the person has been unsuccessful for the job, or probably they don't get an increase, right?
Yeah.
They expect HR to do that job. But it's not the HR's job.
Yeah.
It's the line manager's job. It's the business job.
Yeah.
They have hired that person, so they need to take accountability. But on the flip side, when they are giving promotions and they are giving them bursaries, guess what? The very same line managers want to be the one giving the good news, but leaving the bad news and the hard stuff to HR, which should not be the case. And I think we need to get to a point of having to distinguish what is the role of HR within the organization and what is the role of management within the organization. And management also understanding that people is their core.
Yeah.
And it's not the HR's job. We are the custodian of the processes. We can help you utilize the processes, guide you, upskill you, hold your hand to doing it correctly, to mitigate the risk of getting yourself into the CCMA, into the labor code. So our role is it's a very tough, we are fine between a rock and a hard place. And unfortunately, it's difficult at the same time to please, everybody. But we try to do our jobs within the confines of the legislation, of course, being adaptable to what is happening in the world, to the current trends, but taking people's best interest at heart, but also taking the business interest at heart as well.
Okay. Well, that was well explained. You actually make me respect HR more, because I'm like, okay, this is a very complex job, and you can't just jinx it. You need to know the legislatures. You need to know the labor laws. You also need to understand human behavior,
of course,
and be able to resolve conflict and everything else that you do. So thank you for doing the Lord's work.
Right, guys, we've got one follower for HR who supports.
Yes,
and now understands our role.
Yeah, Amanda to you guys. So one of the things that you said was the fact that you need to transition with the trends of what is happening around us. And for us, or for me as a psychiatrist, one of the trends is that there's a rise in mental health. Okay, so more and more people are becoming ill, whether it's anxiety, it's depression, it's burnout, and they're attributing a lot of their symptoms to a workplace environment.
Sure.
And it's a lot of different factors, whether it's ill health, like somebody has cancer and has been absent from work for a long time, and then when they go back to work, HR. And the thing is, sometimes it's not even HR. There's a trait of a person who feels like they know everything at work, and they try to manage everything. And so one of my clients, their salary was terminated, because they were off sick. There was a sick note, but then the person there, who's not necessarily an HR, just decided you've not been at work, you don't deserve a salary, and just terminated. But I wanted to talk about the mental health policies that I believe all companies have. But in practicality, I feel like those policies are not implemented, So as an HR executive who has been working for quite a while, and you have such a vast experience with different companies, what is your take on mental health policies, whether they are active, whether they are respected? What advice would you give to the people who are running the organizations?
Yeah. I think, to start to your point, like most or all organizations should have such policies in place.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here knowing very well that not all organizations have.
Okay.
And it's for various reasons, right? First of all, it could be lack of knowledge. It could be lack of the right skills within the workplace, where traditionally HR has been known just for paying salaries and recruiting people and, facilitating disciplinary hearings and that, right? So when there is lack of awareness and when there is lack of leadership it is difficult to find those in place.
Okay.
On the other side, you have companies that have these policies, but they are a tick box exercise. They are documented, they are shelved somewhere, but they are not socialized, right?
Okay.
We're doing the right thing by having the policies, but now are we taking it a step further? Are we socializing people on that? Are we updating them regularly? Are we communicating those policies? Are we making mental health a topic in our conversations as EXCOs, as MENCOs, and different forums? Do we do that?
Yeah.
As we're sitting and recording today, yesterday was the 10th of October, which was the mental health, awareness day. Right? Question is, how many of our organizations went there to, to talk about that, to share what their stance is, and to demonstrate what they have done? It's a little.
Yeah.
And to my point, people don't know better. And traditionally, we come to work.
Yeah.
You must work, do your job, and then leave,
Go
right?
home.
And if you are not well, you go to the doctor, you get a sick note, and then after 2 days, you come back.
Yeah.
But also illnesses such as, that have to do around mental health, like your depressions, your anxieties, your, borderline personalities, and all of those things. These are illnesses that are invisible.
Yes.
So by nature of them being invisible, they don't look like proper illnesses, if I may put it like that.
Yes, I get you.
Because with an illness, I need to see that you've got flu. I need to see that you have a disability because you are on a wheelchair or whatever, all right?
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to a point of associating health or workplace, mental health with such illnesses.
Yes.
So I think that's where the problem is. And also, managers don't also not taking the time to understand people and to understand, to say, HR, I am faced with this situation. What can I do? And our policies, not necessarily the mental health policies, just your normal sick leave policies or your disability policies. They talk about all sorts of disabilities, but they don't necessarily make mention of mental health.
Yeah.
So if you've exhausted your 36 days or your 30 days of sick leave because you're hospitalized, that's it. But if you say, I need 21 days to go into a mental health clinic for me to recover from whatever trauma.
Yes.
What is 21 days? Your 30 days is depleted, and therefore it's unpaid leave.
Yes.
And therefore, people stopping people's salaries without also understanding that even if you do stop somebody's salary, there needs to be a process.
Yes.
You need to talk to them. You need to inform them. You need to give them options.
Yes.
Another thing that people don't understand is that we've got the Employment Equity Act, right?
Yeah.
Which also talks about equity and fairness in the workplace. And what that means is that when somebody has an illness, whether it's mental or not, and they are unable to do their job, the company has the responsibility to reasonably accommodate that person to a certain extent that is also practical for the organization or sustainable for the organization.
Yeah.
And if you can't, you need to say, I tried different alternatives, but nothing was working.
Yes.
And these are the only options that I could give. Or given the kind of a disability, this cannot be accommodated. We don't have organizations doing that, properly, because it's like you're working in a stressful environment. This is a cutthroat environment. Therefore, you're not suited to actually work here.
Yeah.
This is a long-winded answer, but I just want to demonstrate the complexity, of mental health, in the workplace, and whether people do understand mental health, and whether organizations and managers also understand that they have a responsibility to care. They have a responsibility to provide a safe working environment.
Yes.
And that also goes for a safe working environment physically and otherwise. Because when we start looking at the Health and Safety Act and you're talking about providing a safe working environment, you're talking about, running water, sanitation, having ramps for wheelchair and all of those things. But no, it also stretches as far as mental health. Is your environment conducive enough for somebody with a mental condition to also succeed?
Yeah.
Because those people are not cognitively impaired.
Yes.
They are equally competent. They're equally, competent to hold high positions within the organizations. But we don't know because they haven't seen that, right? And I think it's in this generation or in this era, with such platforms where we need to educate more, where people need to ask themselves, what am I doing wrong? What am I not doing right? And HR, I don't know better. Help me, and when probably HR guides, you can't say to HR, no, I don't have time for that. Because we're always chasing KPIs, we're always chasing targets at the detriment of our people. So there's a lot of work to be done, and that really starts with awareness. Because having a policy and people not being aware of it, then it defeats the purpose of having a policy.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I feel like you're advocating for our patients, and I really appreciate that. So one of the things that also I encounter in practice is someone being excited about going to work, or somebody who has been working for a while and they're starting to encounter problems at work, whether it's ill health, whether it's conflict with a manager, whether it's poor performance for various reasons. And then they come to me as a psychiatrist to say, I'm really battling, and can you please try and maybe book me off, or they just come to seek help because they're conflicted at work. And I would ask them things like, for example, if someone says I'm having conflict with a manager, to say, have you escalated to HR? Do you know what the contract stipulates for what you are signed up for? And most of them don't know. So what advice would you give to somebody who is employed when it comes to orientating themselves with the requirements that are stipulated in the contract?
Sure. So I think what's important, and you've started it well, people need to read their contracts at work, or when they actually get employed and they get contracts, or they get promoted and they get new contracts. You need to familiarize yourself with the terms and conditions of that employment. What are the terms and conditions of this contract or of this work relationship? Over and above that, what rights are contained in the legislation to protect me and to enable me to do my job? Once people are informed, it makes it easier for them to be able to stand up for themselves, or to really challenge the status quo, and following the process properly to the T. And I'm saying this because in that environment or circumstances whereby you're having this friction with your line manager and you just don't know where to go. You don't know where to go because probably you haven't went to look at your processes or and your policies to understand, to say, I'm aggrieved as a person. This relationship with Clementine is very strenuous, and I feel that I'm not being treated fairly. And therefore, if I'm aggrieved, who do I go to, right? And you'll find that the first step, it says, maybe have a conversation with your line manager to say, I'm not comfortable with this, or I do not like how you treat me. But also, it's possible for people to not follow that process because it is the very same line managers that are either, victimizing them or harassing them. So it doesn't really help as much. In that regard, you need to go to your HR to say, this is what I'm experiencing with my line manager. And I need your support and guidance how to navigate the situation. The expectation is not for HR to go to manager and say, hey, manager, Clementine is saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What have you done? And end. You're not helping the situation, because that's when people start, doubting, our role as HR. So you need to get the person. So have you spoken to him? No. Why? Maybe I'm scared because, I'm intimidated. But is it possible as an HR person to actually help me to manage that conversation, or if I can have that conversation in your presence, right? And HR cannot say no. And when HR says no, then we have a problem with HR. Alternatively, you can go to your manager super senior to say, this is what I'm experiencing with my line manager, and this has been going on for some time, and I need an intervention because I cannot continue like this. I need to do my work, but the environment is not, enabling. And when you're having these conversations, whether you're reporting the matter to HR or to your super senior, I often say to people, it's important to document the conversations, because within the legal space, or within the labor legislation space, when you don't have evidence to back up what you have done, it becomes difficult, for you to actually cross the line with your matter. So whatever that you've spoken to HR, you can go back. Dear HR, thank you so much for your time. This is just to formalize our conversation, to say, I've got a problem with my manager, and these are the problems, and this is what I've experienced in the last 3 or 2 months, right? If you've spoken to the senior manager, you do the same. Thank you for taking time to listen to me. This is what happens, and I'm requesting for your support to deal with this. And if they don't do anything, you go back again to say, guys, it's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I haven't had anything. I'm still experiencing the same challenges. Then you take it to whoever that's higher up. In that way, it is easier for you that when you do not get internal joy or internal conflict resolution, you can take it to external conflict resolution bodies such as the CCMAs or the bargaining council. And if you are saying, I'm not being helped internally, you can say, but I've been complaining for 6 months. and nobody has done anything. Or I've had this grievance and there was no outcome. And then I went to step 2, I was ignored. And step 3, nobody said anything. And therefore I'm coming here.
Yes, I get
right.
you.
Then you are demonstrating to an external, arbitrator or commissioner to say, this is what I've done. And this is what the company policy is saying. Because the company policy will say grievance stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. If not, then take it externally.
Yeah.
Depending on the severity, of the harassment or whatever, then it could also be a formal process. Then in that regard, even if you resign to go and, claim for constructive dismissal,
Yes.
you need to show that you have exhausted the internal processes and they did not yield any results.
Okay.
Hence, you have resigned and hence you have came here.
Yeah.
But also coming with the issue on bullying as well and all of those, you need to document these things. You need to keep a diary.
Okay.
It's unfortunate that our law would expect the one who alleges to bear the honors of proof, right? I wish somehow it could be vice versa, where the perpetrator could say, let me prove my innocence.
Yeah.
Because then it also bears emotional burden on the victim, But to help yourself, as hard as it is, document, this is what Clementine did on this day at this particular time, and these were the bystanders. This is the meeting that we were in, and these were the attendees.
Okay.
This is what he said, and you know what I mean?
Okay.
So that when you put forward a claim or your case, it's not a hearsay. It's like, but this is, didn't we have this meeting? Were you not wearing this thing? Was so-and-so not in this meeting? And that then helps you to build up your evidence to take the matter up. But you can only do that to a point where you are informed.
Yeah.
You understand the policies, you understand the legislation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was well explained. I just have maybe 1 or 2 questions, right? So another one that another conflict that I'm experiencing is back to work after ill health. So someone has been ill and they were booked off for 3 months. And then now they have to go back to work. And during that 3 months, there was no communication with the employer, rightfully so. And then now they're going back, and most of them just go back to work and then they sit. They don't know who to talk to. What are my expectations? What is it that I'm able to do? And then sometimes I will get a call or an email from the employer, whether it's through a line manager or HR, to say, are you sure this person is ready to come back to work? And I'm like, yes, the sick note says they are. We've assessed them. We're comfortable. What is it that you're worried about? And you can see that they are anxious. And some of the patients says, I feel like I'm being pushed out. I have some patients who said, I went back to work and I said, nobody spoke to me. My responsibility were not instituted. I had sad eyes even from my fellow colleagues, because you were gone and you left me to do 2 people's jobs now. So there's a lot of resentment. So how can we support somebody who has been off for a while to get their confidence back when they go back to a work environment, because they have been clarified or they have been cleared by the medical professionals to say they are fit for work?
Sure. I think what's important, I know you said within the 3 months, there has been silence or no communication between the 2 parties, and fairly so, which is all good and well.
Yeah.
But at a time when the employee is also nearing that return date,
yes,
I think it's important for them to also make the line manager aware to say, hey, here with my latest sick note, I'm deemed to return to work effective 1 November, right? So that they are somehow prepared for your return on the 1st of November, because the last thing is for you to pitch on the 1st of November and no one is expecting you, because it means no one would have prepared for you. One of the things that I often say to some employees that are preparing to come to work and they share their return date notes, I normally say, can you also then ask your treating medical practitioner to also indicate for us to say, are you ready to return in your role as it was? Do we need to slowly integrate you for a month? And for how long must we give you reasonable accommodation? Because the employer has that responsibility by law to provide that reasonable accommodation. So they just can't ignore you. If they ignore you and they're not integrating you back, and then going against the Employment Equity Act that says you need to provide reasonable accommodation. And then employers as well, then they actually need to also maybe then get an occupational therapist, right?
Yeah.
To say, this is Boniwe, she's been off for 3 months and this was the condition. Boniwe is employed in this job. This is Boniwe's job description. This is Boniwe's KPIs, and this is Boniwe's, health condition. So, given all of this, what do we need to do to integrate Boniwe back? What reasonable accommodation do we do? Do you think with the medical report that we have received and the job as it is, she can just go back?
Yeah.
Or we need to give her time to actually reintegrate?
Yes.
And that could mean maybe working half day for the first week.
Yeah.
And then increasing the hours by like an hour every week.
Yeah.
And making sure you don't get them into stressful environments and getting them, in front of clients immediately if they're a client-facing, person. If they're in a high-pressured work, make sure you slowly get them back into that. So we can't also overlook the importance of an occupational therapist. With when the person returns to work.
Yes.
And all of these things, they also come with a financial need, which companies don't often make budgets available for them, because why must I make budget available for an occupational therapist, or for somebody to come and assess? So those are the things that they need. So for me, I normally say to employees, if your doctor can give us more information to help you integrate back, it's better, because it's coming from a medical practitioner.
All right.
Your line manager is unlikely to know because they are not experts.
Yes.
But as an HR person, I can understand, but I need information to help socialize the manager to put a return to work plan together. And I think that's where we're missing it, because we expect Boniwe to return as that Boniwe who had energy, who was a high performer and everything else. But the circumstances have changed. So employees, if they can also open up that line of communication, also share and get those reports, it really helps, because we have seen in certain incidents whereby the person will say, I consulted a labor lawyer and they said I must not share with you the condition.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we cannot help something that we don't know.
Yeah.
So you also as an employee need to empower us with the right information to support you. And if we don't, like I said, understand the processes, understand the legislation, escalate us if we're not doing what is supposed to be done.
Yeah.
We need to hold each other accountable, and HR also needs to be held, accountable. But I think what employees, or rather employers, need to have in their policy, it's like the return to work policy, there's reintegration into the workplace, on different conditions, but getting that occupational therapist, input, to make an informed decision. Otherwise, a line manager will not know. They only know the technical aspects of their job and how to push production and how to get results. They are not experts. So companies need to actually build that into their policies as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I hope that they are listening, and they will. But also a takeoff for me is that as a medical professional, I also can assist in the process by providing the medical report that can maybe advise on how somebody can be integrated back to work. So I appreciate that we're having a mental health conversation with a HR executive, and who is highlighting the fact that we still have a long way to go when it comes to mental health. And we understand that it is a new thing. Mental health was previously not spoken about. Now it is spoken about everywhere, and sometimes it can lose its impact. But the aim of this podcast, it really is to empower the listeners to know what it is that they need to do in certain situation. So in closing, Boniwe, what would, if you were to change one thing when it comes to a workplace environment, when we need to integrate mental health, what would be one of the things that you would possibly consider and do?
I think for me, it's really the education around mental health. We can put all policies in place, but if you're not educating people, and by educating people, I mean both employees, both management, both leaders, we're not going to get anywhere. And normalizing, bringing mental health conversations into our business strategy, because we have strategies to get results. We have transformation strategies. We have, employment equity strategies, so that we can meet our targets, so that we can make a contributions in the communities that we serve in. But we don't really have, a wellness strategy, or we're not incorporating wellness in those transformation and employment equity strategies that we have. So for me, it's really around educating people, sharing as much information as we can. And also from a management and from a leadership perspective, really around developing that, that maturity, that skill, that softer side of management, because that's what we need when we're dealing with such, conditions. You need a leader that is mature, that is understanding, that is empathetic. We need a leader that also leads with the heart, but can be objective enough to drive results. And we can't separate the heart and the head when managing people. And oftentimes, historically, people have been taught to separate the two.
Yes, yeah.
And I often say with COVID has taught us that work can come into your house.
Yes.
So it means my house problems can go into your workplace as well. You can't say leave them at the door, but you expect me to take your work inside my house.
Sure.
So oftentimes we want to separate, or organizations, leaders, and us, in general, myself inclusive.
Yeah.
We want to treat, people as assets for us, but we don't want to look at them as holistic being, from an emotional point of view, from a mental health, from a psychological health, from a physical health. We can't separate you, Clementine, in your work environment and say, this is Clementine, the employee. He's got a physical appearance, he's got emotions, he's got psychological problems, because financial wellness and all of those things, we need to holistically take you as that, because if any of those aspects in your life are not going well, rest assured they will have a ripple effect into your environment and into your productivity. So for me, it's really around the education. Let's start educating each other. Let's start to be aware, and also let's put ourselves in people's shoes. If I was the one with this condition, how would I want my employer to receive me? How would I want my line manager to treat me? And once you answer that question, then you need to be able to treat the other person the same way, because in certain instances we are quick to receive and accept managers that treat us well, but we don't give it to our junior people as well. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that was well explained, and I feel like this was very informative, and I feel like our viewers would know how to manage issues, how to raise conflict in the workplace, and how to protect themselves as well, but also orientate themselves on the contract that they sign. So Boniwe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before I close, I want to ask you to just have a comment on what you do also personally, because you know the employer, you know the organization, and you know what is required of people. And sometimes there is that discrepancy where the employees are not well equipped, whether it's because they lack certain skills, so I know that you do coaching and personal development on the side to help individuals. So can you please just take us through before we close? Thank you.
So for me, I've always advocated for fair work practices or people practices. And I also have a passion, for people. And as a result of that, I do a lot of, community projects and also like media contributions to teach people around HR as a profession, and to teach people around the labor landscape, of our country and obviously of the world, because we are part of a global community. So I talk a lot about on that. And the purpose for me is just to teach people. It's not to side with employers. It's not to side with employees, but it's just to teach everybody to say, this is what, you need to do in an employment relationship. This is what you need to be aware of. This is how you need to show up. This is where you get information, because I think that's a way that we can make a contribution in our communities. If we are comfortable in perpetuating people's ignorance, we are actually creating, a problem for ourselves, because we will always be fighting, always disciplining, always firing people, always going to the CCMA. So my education is really around trying to eradicate those and to minimize conflicts, because there's better way of doing that. But on a personal development front, I also like coach young professionals, like, graduates or people that have just like 2 to 3 years within corporate, in terms of how to navigate, corporate for success. What are some of the things that are happening in corporate? What is expected of you? How to show up, for success? How to build a career with what you have? I do that because I believe that once a person has an opportunity, to engage with somebody who has been there, who has been through the journey, it makes it easier for them to have a better experience than the one that I had. So for me, it's really around, how do I help people navigate, workplace dynamics as effective as they possibly can. So this is what I do over and above my job.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It was great to have you. Honestly, I really appreciate your time and your expertise and how eloquent you speak and how clearly you explain concepts. So we really appreciate you. Hey guys, I'm really doing my best here to bring the world best experts to help you thrive. You know, it's not enough for me for you to be well. I really want you to be thrive and not just be disease free. So thank you so much. And so keep watching, share, like, subscribe. Let's grow this community bigger and bigger. And until then, love your mind.